Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hey there, folks. This is Matthew O'Sullivan, co-host of the podcast, and That Is Why I Hate You. It's a podcast where myself and my good buddy Joaquim sit down and talk about the groups of people that drive us crazy. You know, people who pee on the toilet seat and don't wipe it off, or cut you off in traffic and then give you the finger. That kind of people. So if you're interested in a little recreational complaining, feel free to check us out at atiwihy.com. Today, I'm here, however, to take the time to talk to you about one of my earliest memories of video games and one of my favorite games of all time, Police Quest: In Pursuit of the Death Angel. Police Quest was a very early PC game released in 1987 by Sierra Entertainment. If you're not familiar with Sierra, they really pioneered the graphic adventure game genre, releasing a whole host of game series. In addition to Police Quest, they also released King's Quest, Space Quest, the Leisure Suit Larry games, and all of those were fantastic in their own right, but Police Quest was really my first dive into the world of Sierra and the world of PC gaming as a whole. If you've ever played the legendary games such as Maniac Mansion or The Secret of Monkey Island, you're probably familiar with this style of game where you're adventuring your way through a 2D pixelated environment. Unlike these games, though, where you typically select from a list of actions and then click on an object in the environment in which you'd like to perform that action, these early Sierra games, like Police Quest, used a command prompt in which you'd actually type in what you wanted the player character to do. Now, sure, sometimes you'd run into a prompt that would be met with some variation on an error message, such as, "I'm not sure what you want me to do," or "I can't do that," for example, but it was really incredible how well thought out these games were, with the writers and the developers thinking of hundreds of possibilities of what the player may type in for any given situation and having a resulting outcome. In Police Quest, you take on the role of Officer Sonny Bonds, a traffic cop, starting the game presumably as Officer Bonds starts his day. You're right there in the middle of the precinct. Upon your first play, it seems kind of daunting. You're not really given any indication of what you're supposed to do. You're just a player character standing there in the middle of the precinct. And it really requires you to kind of observe your environment, use text commands to examine items, search areas, interact with non-player characters, read signs, read documentation, and that sort of thing. Speaking of documentation, one of my favorite things about this game was the inclusion of a manual that contained what they called the Policeman's Indoctrination Guide. So this guide would explain how certain situations were to be handled as a police officer, including traffic stops, your personal hygiene and how your uniform was supposed to be presented, and more things like that that needed to be referenced or memorized if you were smarter than me in order to progress through the game. For example, really early on in the game, you stroll outside to enter your police car and start your patrol. However, if you didn't complete the vehicle safety inspection that's outlined in the indoctrination guide, you'll blow a tire while you're out on patrol, causing you to lose the game. Now, the game did have an autosave function, so you could press the F2 button to autosave, but if you saved after you got in the car without completing that inspection, but before your tire blew, well, you were out of luck. Game over. You had to start over. And that did come up from time to time throughout the game where you were a little farther in, and it could be really frustrating, or it really reminds me of how hard games used to be. The way autosave works now in some games, it's just such a huge difference. The game also came with a large map of the city, which you would need to reference as calls came over your police radio, to which you need to respond. So you'd be cruising around the city, and you'd get a little text message that said that there was something that you needed to respond to. They used call signs, which were also in the indoctrination guide, and you'd need to respond to them. These kind of ranged, they would be routine traffic stops, drunk drivers, and then one of my favorites was a situation with unruly patrons in a bar. But in each case, you'd need to refer back to that indoctrination guide and do the right thing. So if you forgot to handcuff your suspect, he'll take advantage and he'll whack you over the head. If you take the phone number of the beautiful woman you catch speeding instead of giving her a ticket, you can go call that number and you'll find out it's the police sergeant's wife on the other end. Forget to put your gun in the gun locker outside the jail? Well, a prisoner's going to take it and he'll blow your head off. Hell, if you put the gun in the locker but forget to close the door, you can say goodbye to your gun. All of these ended with a game over. Now, I don't want to ruin the storyline. I really do suggest you try to find this game maybe as abandonware or something and give it a shot. But eventually, you do get promoted to detective, and along with your partner, The goal of the game is to attempt to stop a drug lord that's terrorizing the city. The detective work is really made all the more real by the fact that you're using a text prompt. So you really have to walk around and investigate every single little thing as you're trying to take down this drug kingpin. You can't resort to just clicking on every action on every object you can find. You had to figure out what to type. The variation in gameplay also added to the charm of Police Quest. So yeah, most of the time you're exploring 2D environments, but there's sections like the aforementioned patrol section where you're navigating an overhead view of the city map, Grand Theft Auto style, those early Grand Theft Auto games, piloting along your little three square pixel car. And then there's a very intense poker game later in the game in which you have to win more than you lose in order to gain the trust of one of the bad guys. And those really mixed it up. Now, even though the game itself was wonderful, I think what really put it over the top for me and made me love it was being silly and exploring all the crazy ideas I could come up with. It was amazing what these writers and developers included in this game. You tell your player to take off his clothes, and sure, he'll do that. Of course, you get fired, but he'll do it. You could join a fellow officer in the shower, and he'll yell at you. If you tried to fire your gun without first removing it from your holster, you'll blow your own foot off. All kinds of crazy little things like that were included. Oh, by the way, you know how frustrating QuickTime events can be now? Imagine that if instead of having to push a couple buttons, you had to type in unholster gun and fire gun all within a second or two. It's really, really stressful. Man, there was one time I even told my player character to urinate on a plant, and he did. And again, I got fired, but it was worth it just to see the ridiculous animation. The creators really had a sense of humor. It showed in the game. And you could spend hours just seeing what they had baked into the game that had nothing to do with the storyline itself. It was just stuff they thought, hey, somebody's going to try this. Let's have something happen to make them laugh. And I often really look back fondly on those early days of PC gaming. There were some fantastic games that beckoned me into the gaming world. I had played some BBC text-based games and some other text-based games on an old Commodore 64 I had, but Police Quest was the first game I played that was so open-ended and such a time waster. It was unlike console games of the time where, they were pretty linear and you're pushing some buttons on a controller. It's just not the same as typing in endless text prompts. It was truly, to me, like putting yourself into the life of another and the world around them. And that was way before games like Grand Theft Auto 3, Metal Gear Solid, and some of those early open world games had done it. There were some other games in the Police Quest series. The second and third entries, they maintained a similar style, but they did eventually move away from the type of gameplay for more of a point and click approach. And man, I'll never forget the first time I played Police Quest Open Season, which I believe was the fourth game in the franchise. And I had found that they had completely changed the gameplay I had grown to love. I guess it's as they say, though, the times they are changing. Games evolve over time. New things happen, new things come out, and sometimes it's for the better, sometimes it's for the worse. Either way, I thank Police Quest for pushing me to expand the types of games I played and for getting me into PC gaming in general. It really opened me up to a world where games themselves could be incredibly open, with each playthrough really unique to the individual. Something that's really, really common with games today. All the games today, I'm playing Horizon Forbidden West right now after playing Horizon Zero Dawn, one of, if not my favorite game of all time. And I just love getting lost in the game and just exploring and doing what I want and not even following the main storyline. Maybe I'd never have experienced all of the gems of today if I wasn't first playing Police Quest on my PC. So I hope you enjoyed hearing me reminisce about a game I played well over 30 years ago now as a child, exploring my very first PC. Thank you for listening, and as always, happy gaming.
Hey, Nerf herders.
You sure you want to go with that?
Hey, everyone?
There we go. More inviting.
Have you ever had a movie that you really wanted to love, but something holds you back?
Or one that you did love in spite of a flaw?
Well, I'm Case Aiken.
And I'm Sam Alisea.
And on Another Pass, we sit down with cool guests to look at movies that we find fascinating.
But flawed.
And we try to imagine what could have been done when they were made to give them that little push.
We're not experts. We just believe in criticism.
Constructive criticism.
Sure.
So come take another pass at some movies with us.
And every now and then, we can celebrate movies that did it on their own, too.
You can find us at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Pass it on.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.